Now, before we move on to looking properly ahead to this weekend's racing action, there's just to be a little bit of update of news, hasn't there, Pete, with what's going on with the World Anti-Doping Agency in Indonesia and Thailand. They have confirmed that the national flags of Indonesia and Thailand cannot be officially displayed at MotoGP, World Superbike, F1, or rather any kind of major motor racing event until non-compliance has been lifted.
That's right, yes. As we spoke previously, I contacted WADA because it's such a wide range in this non-compliance. It covers all sport, from Olympic Games downwards. So I was just interested, obviously, in the motorsport side and particularly MotoGP. They confirmed, firstly, that the events that are already in place, so we've got the Indonesian World Superbike round coming up in a month's time, and then in March, their MotoGP round, Thailand in next October, those will stay in place because they're already agreed, if you like. Because the non-compliance consequences, as they call them, punishments, you might say, include the fact that you can't sign up for more new events. So they're already signed up, so that's not an issue. Also, the competitors, it doesn't affect them. Thai riders, Indonesian riders, they can still compete, no problems there. Then it comes down, and some of the other consequences are national anthems are fine, but it seems you can't officially display flags. So again, it's not going to be a massive issue apart from a podium ceremony. So, it's not the end of the world. Obviously, it's a fine line. WADA want to have enough consequences that people do stick to, let's say, following the code, the anti-drug doping code, as they should. So there has to be some downsides to not following it. Now, as we see with Thailand, it's more of a procedural thing. They need to legally adopt the latest sort of updates to the code. So that I'm hearing about 3 or 4 months that should be done. So maybe this would all be cleared up for them before Rum next year. Indonesia, it's a bit more complicated because it's something to do with their testing samples and schedules. That could be a lot longer. And so it'll be interesting to see what happens at the upcoming World Superbike and MotoGP rounds. Because this is, as you say, officially is the word. So, of course, you can have riders waving flags of their own. The grandstands with all the fans could be waving flags. On the other hand, do you really want to upset WADA too much when you're trying to get lifted from this sort of non-compliant stage? It'll be a bit of a tightrope to walk there, I think. They have to be a little bit careful. But at the moment, because there are multi-year agreements, there's plenty of time to sort this out, really. It would only be a big issue if they hadn't have signed the World Superbike agreements, the MotoGP agreements before this ruling, because then in theory, that would have been delayed. So we're not in that situation yet. They're multi-year deals. So I think they'll be okay. But yes, it'll be, as long as we don't, Somkiat Chantra, he's at, I think, 5th place this year. So it's not impossible that he could be on the podium in the remaining rounds, but it looks unlikely. Istahar in Moto3, I think he's been in the points a couple of times. But so, yeah, I don't think we're going to see any big impact of this just yet.
From my point of view, if you want an efficient, proper anti-doping process, then you have to comply with WADA. You have to. It's a world body with recognized procedures. Otherwise, you go back to the Wild West. I don't understand how these things don't happen. I probably do, actually, in Thailand, because you and I, Pete, obviously lived there. So we kind of understand that you've only got to look at the rollout of their bloody vaccine program. If there was an actual vaccine program, no one can be sure. But they're still struggling away over there at the moment. And the country's in dire straits over certain things, that being one of them. So I can understand how procedures have not been followed because it's just the way it is there. It's like but WADA is the gold standard. At the end of the day, you want a worldwide recognized system for making sure doping is crushed. There's no way that any athlete should have any advantage ever through artificial substances. And that's always been my view. And I would support WADA all the way.
Yeah, I think it'll be difficult to disagree with that. Well, make sure you keep up to date with all of that for that and all the latest news on crash.net and all the articles up there updated all the time by Mr. Pete McLaren, who's on top of everything MotoGP and motorcycle racing. Right, let's look forward now to some on-track action. We're back again this weekend in Misano once again for the Emilia Romagna Grand Prix this time. Now, Keith, I know you've already done an insider's guide technically for this racetrack, but what are you hoping for this weekend? We've had a little bit of a break now. We've gone from quite a bumpy, different track in Kota. We're back on familiar territory for, well, all of the riders.
While we were talking WADA, then I was trying to get my phone app to work for the weather, but obviously I've lost all the capability of being able to press buttons as well as actually talk after BSB and it's all about whether the weather is going to be compliant or not, and that makes a massive difference at Misano.
I've got the weather. Do you want to know what it is?
Yeah,
so
go.
Qualifying Saturday. Well, Friday, Saturday looks pretty rainy. Sunday dry but cold.
Well, you see that, if your free practice and qualifying is in the wet and you suddenly got, some dry time in the morning on Sunday in the warm-up that will be cool anyway with loads of, all the rubber washed out the track, it's going to be a very, very difficult weekend in those circumstances, almost better the other way around. So you've had some dry time and got some pace and some setup. But whether you're transiting from wet to dry or dry to wet, it's a tricky thing for the teams. And I mean, particularly, setup-wise, tyre-wise, and the like in those early sessions. They're so important. FP1 and 2, so massively important. Not a track that is a favourite when it comes to being wet, I've got to say. It depends on how that surface is coping with the precipitation. Wouldn't be one of my favourites.
No, well, I think a lot of riders might agree with you there. And Pete, what do you think about this weekend? Obviously, we've got 10,000 extra fans, actually, for this one compared to the last one. And very, very apt because it will be, of course, Valentino Rossi's final race in his home country.
That's right. Yes, I think the retirement decision, when Rossi announced it after the summer break, he said, it doesn't quite feel real because there's still a lot of racing to go. And he said, probably when I get to Valencia, then it'll hit me kind of thing. Well, I think it'll become real this weekend. On Sunday when he takes the checkered flag, the last racing lap in front of his home fans. I think then it will sink in that there's not many races left for him, and it's great news that they've got more fans in. It's still only a fraction of what it was pre-COVID. Let's say I think there was about over 90,000 for race day in 2019. So I think they can have 35,000, can't they? That's 10,000 more than the previous Misano round. It's quite interesting. It was only sold out on the Sunday at the previous round, so it was a bit of a surprise. So they didn't hit the 25,000 limit for qualifying. But I think this weekend, with it being Rossi's last race, as you say, there'll be a lot of fans there making it a special occasion for him. Also, Petrucci's last race, for the foreseeable future anyway. It looks like he's off to the Dakar. You've got Dovi. He raced in the first Misano round, of course, but then there was the test. So this is the first time he's going back to a track he knows on the Yamaha. That could be interesting. All the Italians. Bagnaia needs to beat Quartararo to keep the championship alive. Bastianini on the podium, wasn't he? That shock podium last time out. Marini, his teammate, didn't have a great race, but he was then fast at the test. So I think for all the Italians and all the home fans, if you like, it'll be a big weekend.
35,000 fans and 35,000 police to keep the other 60,000 fans out. That's how it's going to be. Because the Yellow Army coming over from Tavulia on the weekend, just the 6Ks up the road, is going to be manic. 100% is going to be absolutely crazy. It's going to be a real job to keep people out of there because you know what the Italians are like. They've got a bit of passion in their veins and there'll be no stopping them. They'll be there trying to find tickets through touts or whatever it might be, or climbing over or under fences. They're artists when it comes to breaking into racetracks. So it's going to be a manic weekend for sure. And Valentino, sadly, his performances have gone with that retirement ticket. Once you've got retirement over the door, once you've made that decision, you've lost that edge, and he really does appear to have completely lost the edge for being up amongst the top 10. It's devastatingly sad for me. Completely different class and completely different situation. And back at good old BSB, you can tell I've been doing some work on British Superbikes, can't you? Taylor Mackenzie. So we have Taron Mackenzie, who's just won his first BSB title, 25 years since his dad won his first of the modern era BSB titles. So that was all very headline and all the rest of it. But if you think back to Donington Park a couple of weeks ago when Taylor Mackenzie, from 31st on the grid in the Pirelli National Superstock Series, which is all but superbikes with a little less power and slightly not slick tyres, he decided, the older brother to Taron, decided to retire, and he won the race from 31st on the grid. No one expected him to win the race, to go to the podium, and all of us were stunned by it. Obviously the family knew, but he announced that he would retire at the end of this race. So Brands Hatch was his final race. And the reason I'm saying that is it's impossible for a rider, whether they're retiring, whether they're staying, whatever, to push themselves to do something that they can't do, whether it be because of the mechanics, whether it be because of the situation they're in. You can't force yourself to win a race. It is what it is all the time. So whatever is in Taylor's case at Brands Hatch in his final ever ride, a racing ride, or Valentino's at his final ever home event, to pull something special out of the bag is virtually impossible. It's just not possible in the circumstances. You can't. I've won championships, an event before the end, and then gone to Brands Hatch, the final round, usually in domestic championships here. I've gone to Brands Hatch, I'm going to win it. I'll pump myself up and, I'm really ready for it. And we put everything on the bike and we rebuilt the cranks and put new tires, everything you need to make the thing work. And I finished 5th. Really annoying. I tell you, it's really, really annoying. You should have, you've won the championship anyway, so you ought to be able to beat all these guys. You know you can, and yet you don't. And it's almost like you relax too much. You can't force yourself to put it on the edge, on the line. And I just feel that Valentino has got to that point. Baby due, everything happy in his world, team sorted for next year, retirement announced, all these things are done, and he's almost just going through the motions, isn't he, towards the end of the season?
In a strange way, though, Keith, do you think that might actually make for a happier retirement, in the sense that he knows there's no wins 100%. Left in him? You talk about 100%. Guys winning their last races, and then you think after about 6 months, they forget all those hard bits of racing, all that pain and misery they were, and they just see that guy that they were beating, and he's now winning, and they're like, I could do that. Whereas I think Rossi, he'll sit back and go, you know what? There's no wins left in me. I went as long as I could. So I actually think, although, let's say, it's a bit of a painful final season for him, that maybe in the long run, it will actually make his retirement a bit more bearable, shall we say.
It's a last lap exhibition session, isn't it now? I think a wave to the crowd and pull some brilliant wheelies. I think he's an exception, Valentino Rossi, obviously. His career has been so long and so, unbelievably gold standard in so many ways. Half these kids nowadays are earning money just because Valentino Rossi has brought the sport to a level that the world recognises, and that's his legacy is more than just his race wins and his championships. It's the whole sport is grateful to Valentino Rossi, and they should be, and I am. I mean, television, bloody everything, is basically because of Valentino Rossi. Barry Sheene before him, he was another icon that kind of moved it beyond its natural barriers, if you like, natural spectators, natural fans, and Valentino's done exactly the same thing, much later, obviously. But I still, from a rider perspective, though, it's sad to see Valentino sort of languishing where he is. I just hope he doesn't hurt himself in any way, because even though I'm saying he's languishing, I'm talking like he's a dolloper and going around sort of. He's not. He's still going bloody fast, and he's still there or thereabouts. If he was a youngster that was putting in the performances he's putting in, you'll be going, oh, this kid could be quite good. It's kind of, we mustn't write him off completely, of course, but it's just not Valentino Rossi. If he's not vying for that podium, then, what a dream that would be to your home, to be on the podium at your final home Grand Prix. Honestly, I think there would be a bottle of Jack going down my neck at that stage.
Well, Keith, you brought up the
drunkenness to anybody listening either, by the way. A celebratory drink, no problem.
You brought up the weather, Keith, and you think back to Austria, pouring down with rain. You know, the guy that's retiring at the end of the year is one of those that stays out on slick tyres in impossible conditions, and was briefly, wasn't he, in the top three? So it's going to take something exceptional like that. But, you know, with wet weather races, or certainly even worse, if you like, half wet races, which it sounds like there's a chance of this weekend, who knows? Who knows what could happen?
It's MotoGP in 2021. You can't rule anything out, really. And we'll have to wait and see what happens. But, boys, predictions, please. Top three. Pete, come on. I'll give Keith a bit more thinking time because he's got a slower brain today. So, Pete, you can go first. Who's your top three for this weekend?
So this one is, if you like, an easier one in the sense that we're going back to a track that we went to not long ago, isn't it? So, you know, we saw Pecco and Quartararo with the two class acts there. You know what? I'm going to change the order of it, though. I think that Quartararo this time round can get the better of Bagnaia. I think, obviously, he needs to beat Bagnaia, basically, to win the title. So he's got that incentive. He also knows that if they both happen to fall down, it's not the end of the world for Fabio, is it? Because he's got a 52-point lead. So I think that we'll see Fabio, certainly in the first part of the race, attacking to try and get the title wrapped up as soon as possible. Despite what anyone says, they always want to win the title and get it wrapped up, don't they? Because anything can happen. So I think, I'll go with Fabio turning the tables. I think the first race, there was more home advantage for Pecco. He'd been training at the track, Ducati test there. They've now had the race weekend for Yamaha to get the setup right with Fabio, and they had the post-race test, and now they're coming back. So I think that could be enough for Fabio, again, being also fired up to get the job done this weekend. So I'll go Fabio for the win, Bagnaia second, and third place, though, is the really difficult one, I think, for me. I think there's so many, Marquez was close, wasn't it? You've got to believe that Marquez wants to get a podium on a clockwise circuit, shall we say, before the end of the year, just for his own peace of mind to know that the shoulder is getting better. But we saw Bastianini, and we saw the pace that he had. I think, as Keith said, he would have won the race if he'd have started better. So, you know what, I'll go with Bastianini because he's had two good races now, and I think if he can qualify well, he could pull off another shock. So I'll go Quartararo, Bagnaia, Bastianini.
Do you know what? That's a good sporting bet, Peter. I've got to say, ballsy. Quite ballsy. I like that. I like the Bastianini. I always, with all of these things, I quite often lose these sweepstakes over a year because I quite like bunging people in that I think just might pull something out. And I think you've just gone with one that is quite a ballsy bet on Bastianini. But I'm not going ballsy. I'm going Bagnaia. Yeah. I'm going Marquez, and I agree with what you said, 100%, Pete. And he's had that little bit of time off now. With he's had a little bit more time to get himself just incrementally fitter. So I'm going Bagnaia, Marquez, Quartararo.
Oh, okay. Well, I was very tempted to also go the sporting bet and do Bastianini, but that's been the theme of my year so far and why I'm languishing in our standings of three. So I'm going to go for Bagnaia to win the race. I'm going to go Quartararo second, and I was really tempted to put Marquez after initially Bastianini, Marquez, but you know what? Then I'm going to put Miller in third for the final spot on the podium.
The weather might win you through on that.
So you better do it for me because I need the points. Because right now you two are leading the way, and I'm about 3 behind. All right, and actually, he didn't give us his top 3, but Michael Laverty, our guest last week, also went for Bagnaia to win the race. So we'll see. Well, we won't add him to the leaderboard, but we'll see who gets it. Now, I know there's been lots of questions that have come in, but we are really running over time. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to save them and we're going to answer them next time because there's just a few and they're pretty general. So don't worry. If I haven't answered your question or asked it, we will get to it. But gents, that is all we have time for. Keith Hugh, Pete McLaren, thank you very much as ever. We shall return with you, of course, next week, straight after the Emilia Romagna Grand Prix. Keith's off to bed to rest his hangover headache. In the meantime, any questions, do send them in. We will always try and get them all asked eventually in all the usual ways, in the comments, tweet, Instagram, Facebook us, just search Crash MotoGP and stay up to date on all the very latest. Just head to crash.net and leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts as well, only if it's a nice one. And we shall see you right back here next week. Bye-bye.